am the infamous Super Chem Lady, also known as Miss V, Miss Venable, newly Mrs. Weber. I think I'm going to go by Miss Dub. I don't know. Anyway, I've gotten a lot of questions recently on my standards-based grading system and assessment for learning practices, so I thought I would make a series of videos to go through, I guess, my philosophy on these topics and also to describe how they work in my classroom. So if you are a parent or a student that is in my class, I hope this clarifies a few things about why I do what I do. If you are a teacher or interested in these topics, I hope it gives you kind of a springboard into looking into these ideas. These are big passions of mine. They are something very near and dear to my heart. So I love to talk about them. So please feel free, if you have questions, comments, feel free to leave them below the video, or find me on Twitter at SuperChemLady, all one word, no weird spellings. Before I begin, I should make a slight disclaimer in the fact that this is my system. This is the way I have interpreted the standards-based grading and assessment for learning practices. I have read about them in pretty good depth, and Ann Davies, Ken O'Connor, Rick Wormeli, I always mess up that name, are all phenomenal people to read, far more learned and researched than I, but these are where all of my ideas come from. But these are all in the context of chemistry and physics in a way that fits my personality, my teaching style. So feel free to adapt kind of however you see fit. This is not a one-size-fits-all. So a few definitions. SBG, or standards-based grading, is just what it sounds like. It is grading according to a standard of expectation. This is point blank what you expect the student to be able to do. Whether it's to be able to utilize periodic trends to predict atomic properties, or to be able to complete a stoic problem with reliable accuracy. There's a variety of ways you can phrase these things, but it is your learning target, your learning objective. So you're probably already doing this if you're a teacher. But the trick is that you have to actually make sure your tests are directly tied to that standard. If you say that you are assessing on this test stoichiometry, that means if the student gets the chemical equation wrong, you're not assessing their ability to write an equation. You're assessing their ability to complete a stoichiometric problem. So you have to be careful that your tests are actually tied to your standards. So if you're a teacher, spend some time writing those standards in a way that is user-friendly to you and to your kiddos, because otherwise they just become something you put on the board because you're supposed to. The goal with standards-based assessment and assessment for learning is to actually make that an integral part of your classroom. I made notes. What else did I say? Grading according to... Oh, another thing is there are no secrets. It can't be... This is a system where the test shouldn't be a surprise. The student should know exactly what is coming on the test. Sure, they don't know exactly how the question is going to be phrased, but there should be no surprise applications or concepts. It should all be something they've done before and have practiced before. The last thing I want to mention in terms of standards-based grading is points, and this is a really touchy subject when it comes to standards-based grading. I'll talk about how I grade in a later video, but just for now, let me say to be careful with points. Make sure that if you take away points, they are because they did not meet the standard, not because they didn't circle their answer, or because I don't even know, but make sure the points actually mean something. I don't like them, I don't use them, and I'll go into how I do that later. AFL, Assessment for Learning, goes hand in hand with standards-based grading. It is assessing in a way that promotes learning and growth in a process, as opposed to the assessment being an endpoint or a punishment in and of itself. How often do you hear teachers say, if you're a student or if you're a teacher, you may have done this, where the class is misbehaving, so, oh, I'm giving you a quiz tomorrow, or take out a piece of paper, pop quiz. That's assessment as a punishment, and it doesn't encourage learning. You should make sure that you try to keep behavioral and academic matters separate. Behavioral consequences for behavioral problems, academic consequences for academic problems. And that's hard. It's really hard, I'll be honest. The biggest thing with assessment for learning is differentiating between formative and summative assessments. Formative assessments are just what they sound like, when knowledge is forming. In my classroom, this takes the form of homework, practice worksheets, even pop quizzes. But none of these things impact the student's grade because the knowledge is still forming. Just like if you were in your third practice for basketball, odds are you wouldn't have a game tomorrow. You're not ready yet. You're still learning those skills, still formulating all those ideas, getting them all the right way in your head. Only summative assessments, which as it sounds like it's a summation of what you've learned, those are the things that impact your term grade. In my class, this takes the form of your typical tests, but also labs, since I teach chemistry and physics and earth science. Let's see. Another nice thing about standards-based grading and AFL is the fact that it encourages alternative assessments. Since you're assessing for learning, sometimes it takes a different form than a traditional pencil and paper test. Or if you have a student that has true legitimate test anxiety or perhaps a language barrier, you find a different way to assess that knowledge, because it's all about the knowledge, not about how you assess it. Make sure everything's of equal difficulty, but there's no rule that said that you have to do a pencil and paper test the exact same way all the time. If you're assessing for learning, that's really your only goal. The last piece that I want to mention right now are retakes. Again, emphasizing this idea of learning as a process. Occasionally, you fall down, you mess up. On game day, you choke. Or when you're trying to learn a new skateboard trick, your foot gets out from under you and you fall. Sometimes that happens. And so there has to be some way for the student to go back and to re-demonstrate the knowledge that they do know, or to improve that knowledge. If you're a basketball player and you have a bad game, coach makes you run a lot more, do a heck of a lot more drills, then next game day comes and hopefully you do a lot better. Same idea with retakes. You do more practice, meet with the teacher, very individual process. But there is a price that you have to pay to do in order to deserve that retake. But again, learning is a process, and the assessment should reflect that. Let's see. I think that's all I really wanted to get into in this video, was just basic definitions and kind of what these terms mean. To me, according to my reading and my research, this is my third year doing a full standards-based assessment for learning classroom. So I hope that gives you a little bit of insight into the topics themselves. In the next video, I'm going to talk about assessment for learning in my room, how I actually practice these ideas. Because they're all great when you read about them in books, but what does that mean? How does that actually come together into something that will help both the students and not make me as a teacher go crazy? So, if you are a teacher and interested in how I do this, take a look at the next video. If you're a student, I hope that enlightens you a little bit to these buzzwords that are kind of floating around in the education world now. So, I guess that's it. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.